To snímá tamhle. No, okno musíme no, zavřít si na hodíky. A Ondřej už tam má prezentaci. Ale jde to, už tam není, no. Aby no, ale se netáhlo, mě to je jedno. Jo, dobře. No, to nebylo hezké. A Ondro, kde máš tu? Kde seš? Tady, někde se. Mám můžu stáhnout, i když ono je to silný, ale sluníčko docela nám ono je to jeho východ. Můžu stáhnout trošičku. Tak. Já jsem chtěla trošičku, ale oni to tady zase... Ale oni to stejně už nereagují. Ne, oni asi tím, jak odbourali, tam už není plátno. A protože nebereme tam. To jsem měla. Jo, už je, dobré. Tak asi to půl.
A za to musíme říct, jak to nevadí.
Cože?
Se udusíme, jak to nevadí.
Tam jsou to. To se vyšlo. Jsme už unavený. To jako... No, děkujeme.
Máme to zase dohromady půl hodiny.
Jo. A teď 3 a pak jsme jenom tam na půl.
Well, welcome to our last morning. Who perseveres until the end will be saved. So, welcome. It is my great privilege and pleasure to introduce Ondřej Hnilica. He studied in Brno at the Technical University. His doctorate in historical construction. He also has a master's degree in history of art, and his focus is on sacred buildings, furniture, history of religious institutions, and cultural heritage. Take it away.
Thank you. Let's start. The aim of this paper is to outline how a method of construction historical research can help to uncover individual layers of building conversions all the way back to their original form, using the chosen examples from the Jesuits' order houses of rather colleagues. An interest in this approach was aroused during research pertaining to the Jesuits' order house in Belgium. In an attempt to broaden the overall knowledge about its history and functioning, comparative materials from other Jesuits in the Bohemian province were gathered as well. The paper was drawn from two perspectives. On the historiographic perspective in the form of outcomes from the individual species of research, and on perspective on the chosen building following their cognition in situ. First of all, demands placed by the Jesuits on their building will be briefly summarized. After that, the method of the construction historical research will be demonstrated on the key case study of the former house in Telch, and its limits and possible use within historical science will be pointed out. In the chosen examples of solution, other houses in Bohemian province will be mentioned as well. In connection with the construction historical perspective, it will be touched upon the following question. How were the demands placed by the Jesuits reflect during construction of their order houses, and what has been preserved to this day as the heritage of the early modern construction culture? Given the fact that most of the historical buildings are still being used in practice, each one of them still constitutes a distinctive historical sources and therefore must be preserved as such. The construction historical research generally aims to offer the most complex knowledge of the buildings in question, and subsequent findings are intended to be used not only within the historic preservation, but also for the sake of knowledge as such. The demands placed by the order on this building stemmed from practical requirements of their users. The primary concerned three key aspects. The buildings were to be purposeful, strong, and healthy. These demands were based on the experience, agreed on the general congregation, and subsequently examined during a corporate way of construction preparations. The corporate way of planning and constructions means a dialogue about the actual building that took place between the order and the role of building owner, donor, and construction professionals. Other recommendations were formulated by the Jesuits themselves. Building of the order was supposed to be located at the calm and airy place close to the city center. The first requirement is connected to the above-mentioned demand on a healthy building. The location close to the city center is connected to the social status of the order. As for the theory of architecture of the order, Richard Basel introduced reflection on the three approaches that were frequently used in the early modern period, not only by the Jesuits. Basel perceived from the traditional rhetorical categories imitatio, imitation, variatio, variation, and superatio, innovation. The employed of these categories falls in the framework of formal aspects, not only when it comes to the overall layout, but also in the individual details. The order house in Telch, which will be introduced briefly, was chosen as the key case study. Telch was chosen for its remoteness and calm atmosphere, which was quite unusual given the active nature of the order. The reason was the specific purpose of this order house in Telch. This was establishment for the purpose of so-called third probation. Later, the house was enlarged to a college. It was constructed during two phases. The first one took place in the middle of the 1650s using the U-shaped ground plan. Two conceptual plans documenting this phase have survived. The spatial and functional plan of the ground floor. Shortly after the order purchased neighboring houses for the pharmaceutical laboratory, and complaints about the actual building start to be voiced. They primarily include the cry for their own order church, since until then the Jesuits had jointly used the local for a church of St. Jacob. The second construction phase began in the first half of the 1660s upon acquiring the neighboring building of Bohemiae. The order church was built at the premises for the former deanery, meaning that the premises were constructively closed by the quadrature. Upon the dissolution of the order in 1773, the order house was taken over by the army, which was usual at the time. Only necessary construction works in the interiors were carried out for the needs of the army. The plans of the individual floor have survived. Since the end of the 1980s, the building was taken over by the town, which subsequently established various schools there. Given the need to adapt the building to its new purpose, the highest pressure on the construction changes was extended during this period, culminating in a radical reconstruction at the beginning of the 20th century. Because the requirement regarding the lighting in individual classroom, a part of the perimeter wall, was almost completely changed, and the building got a new Art Nouveau look. Since then, school was remained the main function of the building. At the turn of the millennium, an overall reconstruction took place. Prior to this reconstruction, detailed construction historical research has been carried out, synthesizing the current state of knowledge and expanding it. Finding from the construction historical research, the conclusions of which inter alia present analytically evaluated ground plans enable us to observe gradual changes to a given building and to compare the individual stages all the way back to the oldest construction phases. This process was also followed in the case of Telch. In order to obtain a virtual reconstruction of the order house and the reconstruct functional and various spatial units and their links. The building conversion and its adaptation to the new uses was done through adjusting individual spaces by connection or separating them. in order to attain the highest possible practicality and purposefulness. This aspect is one of the key demands placed on the building by the Jesuits, for whom was originally intended. The order house in Telch had one specific, namely that in the addition to the unusual duty carried out by the fathers, it was also inhabited by the highest numbers of so-called tertium in certain years. Another aspect of the building of the order, stemming from the demands on purposefulness, are communication of roads, not only in the actual building, but also within the Jesuits' town Iceland as a whole. In Telch, in a constructionally popular roofed footbridge was used. It offered a faster connection with the seminary and the adjacent outdoor bridge, which led all the way to the dispensary located behind a pond. An indoor corridor can be found here as well at an unusual location by the atrium, which was common for the older orders. In the case of the Jesuits, it was usually located by the outer building perimeter in order to create a sound barrier and to ensure the sought-after calm. Away from the busy square of street, demands to solve problem noise coming from the streets are now, for example, from Znojmo. We were repeated complaints called for effective construction solution. Demands calling for a strong, or rather solid, building were supposed by the fact that such buildings were not only safer for their users, but also more representative, since given the static properties of the building and its fire safety, some rooms were equipped with walls instead of wooden ceiling. This demand placed on newly constructed order houses, shortly constructed with the experience of many Jesuits who lived in various provincial clusters of older houses that had been either purchased or received as a gift. This was the case, for instance, in Jihlava, where the Jesuits lived in improvisational housing until they got a new building. Yet, relics of older construction can be found in the individual older houses, although their frequently unstable nature would even lead to a collapse of various parts of the buildings, as was the case in Hradec Králové. In Telch, not only parts of older walls were found, but also two houses by the entrance to the church crypts that had been incorporated into the wall during the second construction phase. The demand for a healthy building can be best summarized in modern terms as follows. The building was supposed to be dry, airy, and with healthy air. In the case of Telch, this could also include successful attempts for the fathers to prohibit burying at the cemetery by the parish church and to establish a new cemetery outside of the town. The problem was that the original cemetery was located directly under their windows, and they complained about unhealthy air caused by the casing remains, which, together with moist coming from the surrounding ponds, did not contribute to the a healthy environment. The key aspect of rebuilding was a good supply of water, as well as appropriate measures regarding the wastewater drainage. These issues are linked to the question of how the neighboring building deals with this problem. In Telch, the issues of water supply was solved thanks to the system of ponds around the town. As for the Jesuit college, there is evidence that the water was supplied from the castle already during the first construction phase. Parts of the system can be still found in the basement. Rescue archaeological research has shown that even older water piping was located in the part of the building where the second construction phase took place. Unfortunately, nothing is known about how the wastewater was drained at the time when the older house was in operation. Yet, examples from the Elvera are known, and for instance, in Hradec Králové, there was repeated problem after the Jesuit college was taken over by the army. There are possible half measures due to insufficient funding caused tension between the army and the town authority. In Telch, the problem with sanitary facilities came up only after the building was converted into a school. And the provisional solution led to the establishment of a toilet extension in the atrium. Let us pause now to translate the above-mentioned rhetorical features into the context of architecture. The most obvious parts of older houses were the refectories, especially thanks to their size and representative style. Guests and the Jesuits were occasionally invited to the refectory, which thus constitute a semi-private space accessible to people with a special social status or to those whose position was extraordinary for the order. That is why the term enclosure is not used in the caliphs of the Society of Jesus. Instead, we talk only about the semi-private spaces accessible only to members of the order that maintain social discreet. Let us return to the refectory. 2. Due to practical requirements, it was frequently built in connection with the library. The dining room was situated on the ground floor and the library on the first floor. The spatial requirements manifested themselves on the highest floor, hand in hand with the requirements on the statics. The refectory had a wall that used to be artistically treated to give to space its representative character. At the same time, the wall constituted a non-reliable fire barrier for the library and the frequently heated space of the museum. It is believed that this pattern was used in Telch, although it was probably interrupted by a dividing corridor, as has followed from a deeper interest in this question. One of the Jesuit fathers, Georgios Hohenegger, wrote a short treatise on how a Jesuit college should look like during his time in Znojmo. It is worth noting that Father Hohenegger, who otherwise devoted his time to obligatory offices of the Society of Jesus, as noted by Dana Toufarová in her study of the college in Znojmo, was surprisingly frequently present at a place where the construction was being planned, already being built, or had just finished as part of his peregrination within in order. It also holds true for Telch. In his case, it can thus be postulated that he was one of experts of the order when it came to demand on various order buildings. This aspect of peregrination within the order has been already known for some times in case of specialization lay brother, craftsmen and artists who were moving within province, and in case of master of their field even outside of their own province. The most frequently mentioned examples in historiography are those painters, sculptors and construction specialists. Recently, a new topic of construction conceptors was appeared. These conceptors, sometimes referred to as the so-called delineators, were members of the order with certain insight into technical disciplines. They were concerned especially with the purpose solution of the building in question. Bohemiae was probably one of these experts. In the case of Telch, this person was a Bernard Geyer, who sent his proposal pertaining to the second phase of the order house by the mail from Vienna to Telch. The current receipt shows that it is possible to trace back numerous people active in this respect. Relation between spatial units, the buildings, and their original or later purpose can be best observed if they fulfilled the specific function. Traditionally, the kitchen and lavatorium adjoined to the refectory. In the actual kitchen, the most noticeable part was the cooking section, including a fume inlet into a chimney. The function of this space was often preserved even during later conservation. Only its capacity was adjusted. A wood ceiling proceeded at risk of fire, as such a fume inlet located by a wall therefore brings us to a system of chimney units with which the building was equipped. The chimney's units grid tell us about the reach of individual stoves, as well as both the level of comfort intended for the individual spaces. A very important aspect related to heating was the fire safety of the buildings. The individual wings are separated by 4 walls. It was possible the entire Jesuit insula was to be separated from the remaining town buildings. Again, these tendencies can be very well observed in Telch, but also elsewhere, since fires pose a great threat to town due to many reasons. Another examples are the premises of the pharmacy and possibility the connected laboratories. Based on personal catalogs, we know that the function of the pharmacist was connection with the function of the gatekeeper. This had a practical reason. The pharmacy was commonly accessible to people from the outside, and it's therefore used to be situated by the entrance. The actual pharmacy, a shop, did not have to adjoin the pharmaceutical laboratory. Ideally, the laboratory was to be separated from the rest of the buildings due to a highest risk of fire, and possibly also due to bad odors produced during the preparation of certain medicaments. The construction culture of the order in the early modern period can be best seen on construction details. Unfortunately, not many of these details were survived to numerous conversions. They can be generated, summarized in the following: numerous stucco on walls, stone cutting details, door jambs, and sometimes even ironworks, of works of art such as fresco or other painting. What is certainly worth emphasizing in the painted panel ceiling that has survived in College in Lichy. Decoration were used especially in the semi-private premises of refectories and libraries. They were probably also present in domestic chapels, although we know very little about how they look like. Within a new exception, Martin Deutsch has gathering remarkable finding about the Novitiate Chapel in Brno, which does not exist anymore. As for the other chapels, we know to whom it was dedicated, but its identification with a particular space is implausible. Even with a maximum effort to uncover all layers of the individual conversion, the purpose of the most spaces containing rooms of study rooms is hard to identify and remain hypothetical in nature. The aim of this paper was to employ the construction historical research in reason with chosen order houses in the Bohemia province. The key case study being Belgium. To take the examples of various functions of the original spaces in the past and to look how they evolved in time and how they look today, and to attempt to reconstruct their spatial function aspects. Although these buildings have undergone many changes since the time they were used by the author, they still carry the heritage of the original function on which they were constructed. They still constitute important representative of the historic preservation fund, especially thanks to their scale and their location within the town. We can still observe details that offer evidence of the work and activities of people who used it, meaning not only the Jesuits. Thank you for your attention.
Have a moment for a few questions. Maybe I can ask about the heating. So what kind of heating did the building have? Were these ceramic stoves?
Probably yes.
We don't have any signs of them. Okay.
I don't know, some example correct, concrete example, I don't know from the house which I visit. I never see concrete, which we connect with order.
There is one very notable ceramic stone in the great refectory of the Clementina, but that's the only one I can think of. Please.
Thank you very much for your paper. Do you have any plan that you describe the real space of the college in Belgium, or do you have to search in other sources to find out?
Really for research.
One more question, maybe we have some explanation for the corridor in the refectory, which is just in the middle of the space. It seems like it's kind of barrier.
Probably for me later, not from the Jesuits, or probably because the space is more of
Well, thank you very much. Let me introduce Martin Deutsch now. He's a graduate in the theory and history of art at Masaryk University in Brno, and his talk will concern Tuzali. So please take it away.
Thank you very much for your introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, as the metaphorical title of my conference paper suggests, I would like to introduce the pilgrimage site in Tuzani is one of the important places in the cult of the Holy Family in Moravia. But at the same time, I would like to take this opportunity to recall some known and new facts concerning the cult of the Madonna of Tuzani and the building history of the pilgrimage site. The origins of the pilgrimage site in Tuzani is traditionally connected to Cyril and Methodius, apostles to the Slavs, who should bring along a wooden statue of Virgin Mary with child. As Jesuit historian Bohuslav Balkin was reminded several times in the previous lectures, narrates in his famous treatise De Vacurzanensis, by the time of the downfall of Great Moravia, the miraculous statue should hide herself because of the subsequent chaos and plundering of the former empire. However, around 1050, the statue should be found brightly shining in the thorn bush in Tuzani by Farmahora. This motive of the discovering of the miraculous images of the Virgin Mary creates popular narrative which is common for other pilgrimage sites like, for example, Pstiny and Vrano or Štipa. The pilgrimage church, or by the way, of course, we can see there several illustrations from the history of the foundation of the pilgrimage site in Tuzani, included in the Manual Marianische History from 1719. The pilgrimage church in Tuzani is mentioned for the first time in the 14th century, but the parish office is documented here just earlier, at the end of the 13th century. This is the time when the statue of Virgin Mary of Tuzani was really made. It's also the period of the first development of pilgrimages and veneration of Vacurzanensis. In the really modern period, bishops of Olomouc, Franz Dietrichstein,
You know?
yes, thank you.
It was my fault, sorry.
Yes, in the early modern period, bishops of Olomouc, Franz Dietrichstein and Karl Liechtenstein Kastelkorn were among the most important promoters of the pilgrimage site in Tuzani. In 1666, Bishop Karl Liechtenstein Kastelkorn entrusted Tuzani to Jesuits from Brno College and Novitiate. Brno Jesuits have organized pilgrimages to Tuzani since their college in Brno was founded in 1578. Once Jesuits took charge of the administration, the new development of the site and the cult of the Virgin Mary of Tuzani started. Jesuits gradually established here the residence, new cloister for pilgrims, and the second church of St. Anne. After the demolition of the Marian Church in 1804, the dedication of the Church of St. Anne was changed to the Annunciation, on which we are looking now. Is the current state of the pilgrimage site, and it's the only church now preserved in Tuzani. And on the left, we can see probably the oldest representation of the pilgrimage site, which is depicted on the frontispiece to the Balkin's book De Vacurzanensis. The statue of the Virgin Mary of Tuzani, which is still preserved in the Church of the Annunciation in Tuzani, was the crucial cult object for those pleading for help, healing, or consolation. The history and miraculous power of the statue was properly emphasized by the aforementioned Balbin in his treatise De Vacurzanensis. Balbin acquainted very well with Tuzani thanks to the 2 years lasting formation in Brno Novitiate. Also described the artistic values of the statue and assisted with its renovation. Apart from the needed reparations, rector of the Brno College, Václav Škodovský, have ordered additional decoration of the statue, such as its dress. However, textile editions were replaced in the 80s of the 17th century by silver adjustments, which create integral part of the figure to this day. In 1683, one of the main Jesuit patrons of the time, Countess Anna Catarina Magnis, had a silver throne for the statue made. It was created by goldsmith Johann Jakob Wegerin from Augsburg, who became the citizen of Brno the same year. Wegerin successively made crowns and silver coat for both figures. These precious decorations could be intended as ex voto to Virgin Mary for her miraculous intervention during the siege of Vienna in 1683. These adaptations also fully corresponded to the contemporary practices required by a number of post-Tridentine theologians. Mirroring its significance and power, precious stones and materials like gold, silver, or glass on such images could provoke more passion and response of believers. The Virgin Mary of Tuzany was venerated by pilgrims coming from Bohemia, Moravia, Austria, or Hungary, and regularly by Marian confraternities and novices from Brno Jesuit College. The main pilgrimage to Tuzany was organized by Jesuits on the fest of San Bartolomeo on 24th of August. Gustav Balbina refers that most pilgrims come on the fest of the Annunciation. Today they could get plenary indulgences. In 1673, Pope Clement X granted plenary indulgences to everyone who should visit the Marian Shrine during the next 7 years on the second Sunday of Easter, and partial indulgences to them who would pray here the litany on Saturdays. Besides, pilgrims came to this place seeking for Virgin Mary's help in various illnesses. Jesuits paid a lot of attention to miracles of Divacurzanensis, which were carefully recorded in the Chronicle of the Brno College annual records, but in illustrated manuals as well. Selected miracles of the Madonna of Tuzany are described in the book Marianische Historie, which includes several graphic reproductions of today not preserved paintings from the former cloister. The Virgin Mary of Tuzany is represented here, for example, as protecting against disasters like floods, fires, wars, plagues, or restoring ones to health. It's needed to be reminded that the miraculous statue has been situated primarily in the main altar of the Tuzany Church of Virgin Mary, but has changed its location several times because of wars or pestilence. These times, the statue used to be placed in the Jesuit church in Brno for public veneration, for example, in the years 1678, 1683, or 1704. In order to express gratitudinous, Jesuits would always bring her back in festive processions to Tuzany. Depending on fest, or here, by the way, of course, Jesuit church in Brno and the main altar from Jan Jiří Schauberger. So, of course, the original altar, main altar is not preserved, but you are looking at the current state. Depending on fests of the liturgical year, Jesuits prepare additional decorations for the Marian Shrine in Tuzany, for example, Nativity Scene, Epiphany, or Passion. The Chronicle of the Tuzany residents inform us about 6 images of the members of the Holy Family surrounding Marian throne. This was probably not ephemeral, but permanent part of such a decoration, revealing another dimension of the pilgrimage site in Tuzany as one of the important centers of the cult of Saint Anne and the Holy Family in Czech lands. Apart from the cult of the Virgin Mary, the pilgrimage site in Tuzany was traditionally dedicated to the veneration of Saint Anne, which is dated back to the 14th century, along with Stará Voda, Alvasser, by Libava, post Olomouc. Tuzany belongs to the oldest Saint Anne's pilgrimage locations in Moravia. Both places are presented, for example, in this university thesis print, and the Bishop of Olomouc, Karel Lichtenstein Kastelborn, is compared to the Karel Borromeo, but the important is that we have here one of the oldest representation of the Tuzany residence, which is depicted on the left side, engraved on the left side, with the Church of the Virgin Mary, which is which was demolished in 1804. St. Anne has been worshipped as patron saint of married couples, safe childbirth, delivery children, but also healthy death. She was venerated with special zeal on Tuesdays, the day of her early childbirth and death. The chapel of St. Anne in Tujani is mentioned in Jesuit sources for the first time in 1671. It could be probably the chapel of medieval origin, which was adapted or fully rebuilt after the Swedish occupation of Tujani in 1645. The chapel of St. Anne was reconstructed again in the 90s of the 17th century in accordance with complete renovation of the cloister with 3 new chapels. The original cloister is depicted on the frontispiece, which I already shown, above in book, while the state after reconstruction is represented on the schematic drawing by Friedrich Bernhard Werner from the first half of the 18th century. In this drawing, we can see the cloister with 4 like chapels and the Church of the Virgin Mary next to the Jesuit residence on the right, which was built in the years 1671, 1673 by architect Johann Baptist Erna, thanks to the gift of the generous donor Anna Maria Jakatowska. Is, by the way, represented in the just several times mentioned book Marianische History in the medallion as one of the crucial benefactor of the Tujani residence, together with the Olomouc Bishop Karel Kastelkov. Regarding the western part of the compound, there is the Church of St. Anne, which was newly built in the years 1693-1698 by Erna. In the 90s of the 17th century, there are these 2 fragments, the chapel and church of St. Anne documented. Other 3 new chapels were undoubtedly given original dedications, St. Joachim, Joseph, and John the Baptist, which are mentioned in the chronicle of the Tujani residence. These dedications clearly demonstrate the significance of the cult of the Holy Family in Tujani, which was visually communicated through architecture and other decorations. One of the donors of the chapels was Joseph Manzo, the Brno merchant, who had an altar, grille, and curtain made for the chapel of St. Joseph in the 90s of the 17th century. The chapels of St. Joseph and John the Baptist are listed as chapels of the dead as of 1730, when they were repaired. During the rectorate of Henrik Schatz, the cloister was redecorated by the Jesuit laity brother Johann Georg Schauberger and Jiří Schauberger, who also made the main altar for the main pilgrimage church of the Virgin Mary. In 1739, this new altar, especially the altar of the St. John the Baptist, were to be built to encourage the devotion of Marian worshippers. The cloister was preserved even after the closure of the Jesuit residence in 1773, when it was gradually adopted. According to the Benedictine historian Gregor Volny, the chapel of St. Joachim was deconsecrated and sold in 1819. In the same year, the south tower was to be added, which is shown in a photograph from the 1880s on the left. It could rather have been a reconstruction of one chapel of the cloister in its southwest corner. This tower was demolished in 1888 to 1891 in connection with the entire adaptation of the facade of the newly consecrated parish church of the Annunciation, originally St. Anne. There is one polygonal chapel with a crypt on the opposite side, and on the opposite side of the pilgrimage side, just in this place, which was probably adapted secondarily at the turn of the 19th, 20th century, and originally could have carried one of the dedications of the chapels of the dead, St. Joseph or John the Baptist. The main center of the cult of St. Anne and the Holy Family in Tujani became the Church of St. Anne, of course, is the only preserved church of the whole former pilgrimage site, although it has been significantly adapted. The Church of St. Anne was intended to serve German-speaking pilgrims. 2 pilgrimage churches, one Czech and one German, were originally located, for example, in nearby Ostiny, where processions from the Jesuit college in Brno were also heeded every year. The foundation stone of the St. Anne Church in Tujani was consecrated by the rector of the Brno College Václav Hartmann on 4th October 1693. But it was not until August 1695 that the plan of the church was submitted for approval by the architect Jan Baptist Erna. In 1697, the church was vaulted on, and the inner and outer walls were decorated with stucco. The main portal was also finished in good stone, and finally the windows were installed. The new single-nave church was consecrated on 26th July on 1698 by the Dean of Brno, Ignaz Miller. The earliest iconographic material for the St. Anne's Church is a drawing by Werner, which shows the early baroque facade of the church connected to the western cloister. The next known representation of St. Anne's Church, then the parish church of the Annunciation, dates back to the 1862, when military camps were held in Duran. The mentioned photo from the 1880s show the church without added towers, which were built, as we already seen, in 1888 to 1891, and creates a dominant of the place nowadays. Already in 1696, the benefactors of the Tuzany residence donated paintings, fabrics, paraments, and other liturgical items for the newly built church. The main altarpiece of the Holy Family from 1708 was painted by the Prague painter Johann Georg Heinz. We would have the possibility to see several paintings, and especially the altarpiece in the St. Ignatius Church yesterday. So it was painted by the Prague painter Heinz, respectfully titled by the Jesuits as Apollos of Prague. Between 1705 and 1708, the Brno councillor František Franz Tripodi contributed 600 gold coins for this new monumental painting. Considering the Heinz painting, however, the art was clearly to exceed this price, as it's evident in the Tuzany Chronicle. The Tuzany painting was based on the intimate paintings of the Holy Family that Heinz had previously painted for the Jesuit colleges in Telč and Brno. In the case of the altarpiece, Heinz was probably inspired by the multi-figure compositions of the same subject by the Silesian painter Michael Bilman. The center part of painting depicts St. Anne with baby Jesus and Joachim, the Virgin Mary with Joseph and Elizabeth with John the Baptist. This group is flanked from right to left by Mary Solomon with her sons James the Greater and John the Evangelist. Mary of Clopas with her sons, James the Younger, Simon, opposite left, and Zechariah, lower right corner. The composition is completed by the figures of St. Stephen, a figure who is holding a dalmatic, holding a tray of stones on the left, and another martyr with a cross who cannot be precisely identified. The scene at the top is closed by the figure of God the Father, accompanied by angels and the dove of the Holy Spirit. The gestures of various figures of the Holy Family just suggest the relationships to each other, but above all their roles in salvation history. The vivid gestural communication of the image, defining these relationships, certainly had a corresponding didactic effect. Heinz's painting of the Holy Family became an object of veneration, especially among the members of the newly founded St. Anne's Fraternity or Confraternity of Tuzany, founded in 1705, which brought together pilgrims from the lands I already mentioned. Other known multiplications of this Heinz canvas attests to its wider cult significance. A copy of the painting can still be found, for example, on the altar of St. Anne's Chapel in the Dornbach district of Vienna from 1717, which was undoubtedly one of the centers of the Tuzany pilgrims on their way to the Tuzany, which are nearby. We also have one of the smaller copy of the Heinz painting, which is held in the Moravian Gallery in Brno. In 1699, an unknown painting of St. Anne is documented in the new church of St. Anne, which was no less a sought-after object of veneration here. St. Anne's appear in pilgrimage songs or prayer books, many of which are universal in character and not connected with a particular pilgrimage site. Liturgies and catechesis in German were held in the Church of St. Anne, and on the titular fest on 26th July in St. Anne, members of the congregation could receive plenary indulgences after confession and Holy Communion between 1708 and 1711, thanks to the gift of the aforementioned Tripodi, a German written book on St. Anne with her engraving was to be published for the use of the members of the St. Anne's fraternity. His book with a long and eloquent title, you can read all the way through, whose frontispiece depict St. Anne teaching the Virgin Mary. This engraving would perhaps be a reproduction of the venerated image of St. Anne, which is mentioned in 1699, which together with the miraculous statue of the Madonna was the emblem of Turan. The same St. Anne's iconography was used on pilgrimage medals, pictures, as well in the sculptures. An example is a small sculpture of St. Anne teaching the Virgin Mary from 1700, placed now in the niche of the entrance portal of the Church of the Annunciation, which originally decorated the portal of the cloister. So the purpose of this paper was to present the wider cult dimension of the Jesuit pilgrimage site in Tuzany, which was one of the most visited pilgrimage sites in Czech lands in the second half of the 17th century. The object of veneration here was especially the statue of Madonna of Tuzany, famous for her miracles to people in needs and diseases. Along with Marian veneration, the Jesuits in Tuzany also developed the cult of St. Anne and the entire Holy Family, which are documented in this locality as early as the 14th century. Several facts attest to this broader cult impact of Tuzany: the dedication of unpreserved chapels of the cloister, the construction of the second church of St. Anne, and naturally the original decoration of the pilgrimage site, which we are now discovering through sources, and unfortunately we still know very little about it. The statue of the Madonna of Turan, originally kept on the main altar of the Church of Our Lady, was to be surrounded by images of members of the Holy Family. This solution of the decoration of the main altar was also reflected to a large extent in the architecture of the pilgrimage area, where the Marian Church was situated in the cloister near the chapels of St. Joachim, Joseph, and John the Baptist, and the Church of St. Anne. It was just the St. Anne's Church which preserved the miraculous image of St. Anne, or painting of the Holy Family by Heinz, that became an important center of the cult of the Holy Family in Moravia. For example, the members of the St. Anne's Confraternity of Tuzany, for whom Heinz's painting was a major object of veneration, gathered there. The pilgrimage site in Tuzany was thus literally embraced of the Holy Family, offered to pilgrims through visual, whether architectural or pictorial means, and its spiritual experience. Thank you very much for attending.
Questions?
Thank you very much for this fascinating presentation. I have just a short question. You mentioned that the cult of St. Anne was in medieval origins, and I wanted to ask you if you know what order or religious order, if it was a religious order, established this devotion. Because in Olomouc we know that it was connected with the Franciscan conventual. So that,
yeah. Unfortunately, I think we don't have any evidence about any order which would be connected to this place in the medieval times. But I think there is evidence of parish church just in the 13th century, and probably the dedication of St. Anne was probably older than the Virgin Mary. So, but don't have any remarks about the orders in the medieval times. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Thank you. How does this conception of the Holy Family relate to, for example, Marian itself, where you have these cults as well, and in a procession actually, you go from one another in some sort of a time sequence. That's my question. Was it inspired by this older side or maybe not? And maybe I can comment on your question. The late medieval cult of St. Anne is normally in the German-speaking lands connected to this sort of burgher culture around 1500. There are a couple of books on that, and they are not specifically connected to an order, but more so with the development of the sort of new burger, of social development of the sort of familial and kinship relation in the late medieval society.
Thank you for your question. I think there is no special connection to the Mariazza, for example, with Turan, but I think that, of course, the cult of the Holy Family was typical for the places like that, for the pilgrimage sites like that. As in the Turan, for example, as in Christina and Bernov, there are places where we can trace the cult of the Virgin Mary and the Holy Family. And yeah, so basically that. I haven't found any evidence about some special connection, but the net of the confraternities was quite wider, as I mentioned. So I think that the cult could be held through the social contexts and through the broader net of the confraternities. So I think that pilgrims probably visited the place repeatedly every year. Turan, but Mariazza as well. I'm not sure if the pilgrimage from Moravia were held to Mariazza, I suppose, very often, repeatedly. So I think the cult could be held through the land of the confraternities. I'm sorry if I don't answer your question, but
Just going to compare elsewhere, maybe in these older sites, and you might see some pattern emerging. That's the second question.
Only one little question about the statue of Virgin Mary and the child in this particular crown. The crown, like for example, in South Africa, crown.
I know that was not a special occasion here. It was not the case of the Turan. And there was, I haven't found any source about the official way of the coronation. So, but yeah, for Cibran, I don't know, St. Thomas from Brno, and yes, from Toulouse. Yeah, it's evidenced very well, and the historian Tomáš Marík is dedicated to it, but not in the case in Turan. It's only the remark that the crowns was there made. Of course, they could have some ritual about it, but it was not described in the sources. So.
Shared question for you about the concept of Holy Family.
Mm-hmm.
You spoke much about St. Anne cults in Tužany, but about St. Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
So, what kind of concept of Holy Family it is? It is connected just with the Jesus relatives' mother sides, or what about St. Anne husbands also?
Yeah, thank you. It's an interesting question. I think it's. I try to show that through the architecture they could perceive the visual contact with the many members of the Holy Family there. There was the chapel of St. Joseph, Joachim, John the Baptist. So I suppose every of these chapels were decorated in relation to the dedication, of course. We have some remark about the altar of St. Joseph, which was donated by one of the persons from Brno. And I think, and it's just shown very well on the paintings of Heinz. There is the whole kinship or much more presence from the kinship of the Christ. So I think they could just perceive it entirely through the architecture, through the Munch paintings later, and of course they could just perceive it separately as well in every chapel. And so I think they could do it both ways, like that. So.
Thank you very much, Dr. Deutsch. So let's move on to our third speaker of the morning, Veronika Polakova, who studied history of art in Olomouc and worked at the embassy of the Czech Republic in Madrid. And now she is working towards a PhD in the art history graduate program at the National Autonomous University of Mexico.
Thank you very much for the presentation. In the next 20 minutes, I will speak about Bohemian Jesuits and Marian topography. But what I mean by Marian topography. Simply, it is a concept where the protection of territory and its people offered by the Virgin Mary is expressed by the localization of her miraculous images within this territory. And this also worked as the mechanism of the sacralization of the territory. Here. Okay, I don't know. This one?
Yeah.
But it's not moving. It's not
doing anything. Okay. Here it is.
Okay.
Yeah, but I didn't do it with this thing.
Okay. Thank you very much. So this idea of protection of territory by the images of Mary in certain places can be traced in the literature of many Catholic countries. But in case in Bohemia, we can find it for the first time in Kaspar Arzenius' book about the Virgin of Stará Boleslav, published for the first time in 1613 and for second time in 1629. At this time, according to Arzenius, the Marian topography of Bohemia was only confirmed by 4 churches with miraculous images of the Virgin Mary placed in their cardinal directions. It was in the second half of the 17th century when it started to appear more frequently, and as I contend, it was the Jesuits who further developed it and popularized it. Concretely, 4 Jesuits from province of Bohemia, Bohuslav Balbín, Jan Tanner, Jiří Trugerius, and Georg Vasculus, advanced this concept during 1650s, 1660s, and 1670s in their literary works. Vasculus and Tanner were also behind the creation of artworks in which it was expressed visually. As I also argue, it was their participation in the project of Atlas Marianus what impulsed their interest in Marian topography. To prove these points, I will first address the collaboration of Bohemian Jesuits with Gutenberg, and in the second part of this presentation, I will analyze several descriptions and visual representation of Marian topography. It is widely known that the project of Atlas Marianus, which started in 1650s, intended to put together information about the miraculous images of Virgin Mary all over the world. It was also established that its author, Bavarian Jesuit Wilhelm Gutenberg, the support of many informants from different Jesuitic provinces. Dominic Julian and other scholars already described how Gumppenberg obtained an information for this ambitious work. It is not surprising that the letters were of utmost importance in this process. Thus, I will only remember a few quick questions about this project. It was in 1652 when Gumppenberg sent letters to provincials and directors asking for necessary information about local images. He also further explained this project in 1655 in publication entitled Idea Atlantis Marianis, which was circulated within the Society of Jesus. Despite of the fact that Jesuits from different provinces were well informed about this project, apparently there were some disproportionality in their response, as Gumppenberg received notably more replies to his inquiry from some provinces than from others. The Jesuits from Bohemian province was very collaborative, as showed this list of names from the 4th volume of the first edition of Atlas Marianus. Between them, I would like to highlight 3 names: Bohuslav Balbín, Jiří Turgerius, and Jan Tanner. The information provided by Balbín and Tanner was included to the first edition, published between 1657 and 1659. This edition contained first 100 images and was divided into 4 volumes. And thanks to this information was put into those volumes, we now know that Balbín sent information about the Virgin of Marta and about the Virgin of Stará Boleslav, and Tanner was source for entries about the Virgin of Chlum, Virgin of Zbraslav, and Virgin of Kladsko. And I'd like to also mention that more information sent by those 2 Jesuits was used in the second extended edition of Atlas Marianus from 1672. I think that this shows us that not only Balbín, who has written and published histories of 4 marine miraculous images, but also Jan Tanner was an expert on this topic. Furthermore, one letter from August 1658, written by Balbín to Tanner, proved that it was also a subject of discussion between these 2 Jesuits. In this letter, Balbín is asking Tanner some details about several images. For example, he asked him about the adoration of Strakonice. He said if this image is now in Rome, in the same van that Friar Domingo Ruzola to the Battle of Atlantis. Or he's asking him if he knows about some image to which are peregrinations in Saxony. And he also asked him if some of this information was given by Gumppenberg. So I suggest that this collaboration with Gumppenberg likely enhanced Balbín's interest in marine topography. However, at the time when his first 2 books about Marian images were published, he could not know the results of this project. Despite of that, he cited in Divatur Zanensis, Idea Atlantis Marianae, and he also mentioned the intended future publication of Atlas Marianus. Later, he cited in Diva Monte Sancti. And this continuing interest in Gumppenberg's work shows another letter to Tanner from 1660s, where he pointed out one error he found in the story of Virgin Christ. Like an error in Atlas Marianus about story. So now I will analyze descriptions of Marian topography, and I will start with those from Balbin's Diva Vartensis, Diva Truzanensis, and Diva Boleslavensis. Balbin worked on Marian topography that comprehended the whole territory of the lands of the Bohemian crown, and he laid the foundations of this topography in Diva Vartensis, published in 1655. So, usually these descriptions of Marian topography consist of names of locations and of some kind of their localization within Bohemian territory. If you put it to the map, it looks like that. In Diva Vartensis, he stressed out that because of the distribution of Marian images in whole territory, it looks like Virgin has built a wall around the country. Concretely, he mentioned 11 images and also the copies of the Virgin of Loreto, but in case of those copies, he didn't specify their location or So in this topography, it seems to be more important than exact location of these images, their distribution in the territory and their relation to the Catholic past of the country. For example, he emphasizes relation between St. Wenceslas and the Virgin of Stará Boleslav, or of the Virgin of Kladsko and Pardubice. And he also mentioned the Virgin of Mariazell because of the alleged connection of her cult with the Margrave of Moravia, Vladislav Inch. The idea of Marian topography is somehow present also in the engraving from this book by Wolfgang Kilian, which represents the Virgin of Varta in the center with Bohemia in the west, Moravia in the south, let's say in the north, and Kladsko in the east. So here, Kladsko, which was an external district of Bohemia, is presented independently alongside with the lands of the Bohemian crown. And in this way, Balbin is forming the topography of the kingdom, where for the first time he resorted to the four cardinal directions. Also, on this occasion, the territories are still not symbolically represented by their miraculous images of the Virgin, but by their respective coats of arms. However, it is the Virgin of Varta who is occupying a central place in this topography, protecting the kingdom. Only 3 years later, the idea of the Marian topography of the kingdom in Balbin's work took a more concrete form in the book Diva Truzanensis. This time, the location of images in cardinal directions of territory of the lands of the Bohemian crown was crucial. In this topography, in the east are all the images of Moravia, in the south, these of Kajov, Bechyně, Budějovice, and Žimo. In the west, Chrum, Kladruby, Květnov, and Březnov, and in the north are Krupka, Hejnice, Kladsko, Varta, and others throughout the Silesia. The presence of miraculous images of Mary in neighboring countries, ideally in the proximity of the borders, was also important here. Concretely, he mentioned Częstochowa, Mariacel, Passau, Neukirchen, and Hejnice, which is already on Bohemian territory but near the border with Prussia. Balbin himself says about the location of these images that the temples dedicated to the Virgin Mary were built in very appropriate places. So they can serve as fortifications and castles, and that the Virgin in this way wanted to extend her protective mantle over the territory. The letter to Tanner, which I already mentioned, proved that he was trying also to find a miraculous image in Saxony to complete this vision of territory secured by Marian churches. He also emphasized the elevated number of Marian images in Bohemia, saying that Bohemia could be envied by other nations for having 24 images alone, despite being only 37 miles long. The description of this topography appeared at the end of the catalogue of paintings and statues of the Virgin Mary in Bohemia, Moravia, and Silesia, which he annexed to the history of the Virgin Journey. And perhaps is in this text where we can see the greatest influence of the spirit of Marianus. The flexibility of this context, to which could be added or not more images, demonstrate one last Marian topography described by Balbin. This one was included to the history of the Virgin of Boleslav that he published in 1673, also it was completed since 1668. In this occasion, Balbin created a Marian topography of more personal nature, using all the images about which he wrote. Again, he relied on the model based on the cardinal directions. Pointing out that he was able to publish histories of images located in the east, in the south, in the north, and in the center of the lands of the Bohemian crown. And he mentioned that if he is allowed to, he will publish also a book about Krupka, which is in the west of this territory. The convenience of the location of these 5 miraculous images of the Virgin Balbin sees in that the Bohemians in this way can praise the name of Mary from dawn to sunset. So Dionysius Sancti, published in 1665, also contains Marian topography, but this time in text of Jiří Prugerius, which Balbin annexed to his book. Prugerius here aimed to prove that the Virgin has a special affection for Bohemia, Moravia, and Silesia, and one of the signs of this special affection is the presence of their miraculous images in so many places within these territories. Then to prove this argument, he described the Marian topography of the kingdom. In this Marian topography, Bohemia has 26 images distributed in almost all districts. He also pointed out the presence of images in border areas, also on the border with Prussia, image Virgin in Hejnice, the border with Silesia and Klatsko, on the border with Saxony and Ulm. In Moravia, miraculous images which he mentioned were Brno, Mikulov, and on the border with Hungary and Koryčany and Štipa. Silesia, according to them, the Virgin Sparta, and in Poland, near to the border, the Virgin Częstochowa. This Marian topography covered the whole territory of the lands of the Bohemian crown, but clearly is more focused on Bohemia. In the sacred territory, as Prugerius stated, Stará Boleslav in Bohemia has main court and castle of Mary, Brno in Moravia is the second one, and she also has other houses in Silesia. However, his Marian topography focuses on Bohemia. He also wanted to show her presence in the remaining lands of the Bohemian crown and test her protection of its borders. Most importantly, he introduced here Marian topography based on the administrative division of Bohemia in 15 districts, the capital city, and 2 outer districts. And it was precisely this model of Marian topography that adopted other Jesuits. First of them was Georg Castulus, Jesuit, who was at the time a professor of philosophy at Prague University. He published in 1665 a book on 14 pilgrimage sites in Bohemia, which he dedicated to his students. Most interestingly, Castulus also invented a discipline that represents the Marian Garden of Bohemia. In fact, both his works were published to announce the graduation of his students. The Marian topography presented by Castulus in these works is limited to Bohemia, but interestingly, only in the version represented on the thesis print, the affiliation of images with districts of Bohemia was considered. The images are clearly identified and located in districts by inscriptions and by codes of arms. So it is important to make clear that this model of Marian topography introduced by Grugerius was also repeated by non-Jesuit countries in following decades. But I did not include the analysis of these Marian topographies to its presentations. Instead, I will conclude with Stanner's take on it. Sorry, here you can see the engravings from Castulus' book in comparison to the thesis print. So Tanner used this type of Marian topography of Bohemia in his devotional program for pilgrims to Stará Boleslav. This program was painted on chapels which were built on the pilgrimage road and reproduced by engravings in the book for pilgrims published for the first time in 1679. In this case, it was made up of 41 miraculous images of Virgin from Bohemia, while Moravia and Silesia are represented by only one image each of them. In this sense, it is interesting that Grugerius also gave the main place in Bohemia to the Virgin of Stará Boleslav, in Moravia to that of Brno, and in Silesia to that of Barta, because precisely the Virgin of Brno and the Virgin of Barta also represented those territories in Tanner's Marian topography. But Tanner, in this case, tried to tie those two images also to the history of Bohemia, because he evoked ancient relations of these images, this territory. In case of the Virgin of Brno, the inscription of the image says that it was in Bohemia until it was donated to Moravia by Charles IV. And in case of the Virgin of Barta, he used different records to tie it to the territory, because he simply pointed out that it is placed on the border between Bohemia and Silesia. In the same sense, it seems to me that we should also understand the presence of two other images of Bohemian origin, that, however, at the time of the decoration of the chapels were in Vienna and in Rome, respectively. These are the Virgin of Stemberg, of the Green Mountain, and the Adoration of Strakonice, which is related to the battle at White Mountain. Sentaner, like some of his colleagues before him, presented a Marian topography of predominantly Bohemian images, which takes into account their distribution in the districts of Bohemia. Those images were from all over the Bohemian territory, and their affiliations. And the assimilation to those districts was clearly stated by the transcriptions. In this way, not only Bohemia was presented as Marian territory to the pilgrims, but they were led to peregrinate through this symbolic space. Thus, I contend that Jesuits arguing the presence of miraculous images of Our Lady nearly in all its administrative districts effectively transformed Bohemia into a sacred space. This case is also important because it was the first time that Marian topography was visually represented in context of pilgrimage practice. In following decades, Marian geographies were placed on several pilgrimage sites in form of series of large paintings, or in one case even in form of sculptures. In this way, pilgrims were presented with the existence of symbolic space where Virgin Mary is offering a protection and showing her affections. In these visual Marian topographies, as in the case of the Western ones, Bohemian images dominated, but some images from Moravia and Silesia were usually included, and sometimes even images from other territories were added. So, to conclude, in the second half of the 17th century, the Marian topography of Bohemia and of all the lands of the Bohemian crown was popularized by Jesuits and by many other authors who were members of other religious orders or secular clergy. However, it was the Jesuits who, after their participation in the project of Atlas Marianus, started to develop this concept. Concretely, it was Bohuslav Balbín, Jan Tanner, Jiří Krugerius, and Georg Castulus who advanced it in 1650s, 1660s, and 1670s. While Balbín worked on the model based on the cardinal point, Krugerius and Castulus preferred the one that uses the administrative division of Bohemia. In 1660s, this idea, thanks to them, also appeared in several artworks. Some Marian topographies were extended to the whole territory of the lands of the Bohemian crown, and others concentrated on Bohemia. However, in all of them, Bohemian images were given some preference. Also, this could be partially explained by the fact that Bohemia had a greater number of miraculous images of the Virgin. It does not seem to be the only reason. In fact, the catalogue written by Balbín and published in one of his Marian books records large number of Marian images also in Moravia. The function of miraculous images in Marian topography was to shape sacred space, and at the same time, they present in many cases within one territory, granted privileged status among other Catholic territories. Thus, we can say that through their literary works, the Jesuits sought to transform Bohemia, Moravia, and Silesia into a sacred space, pointing to the frequent presence of miraculous images of the Virgin. Thank you very much for your attention.
Floor open to questions, please.
question. So I would like to know where the idea of coronation of Mary was born. Like, but we have to look at all our world. So in Europe or Greek or Italy, maybe also Spain. So where, if we can say which Mary was firstly crowned on the head, and because we have very strong tradition here in our lands with Holy Mary crown. So if you found something like that, if you know also from Spain, or maybe Brother Wenceslao can say something about it, because we spoke about it yesterday, and also with Professor Roy about it. So.
And thank you very much for the question, but I'm afraid that I'm not the best person to answer it. I'm totally unaware about the origins of about the early origins of this custom. Actually, I think the most we know now is in books of Professor Mari. I'm afraid that I can't think about it. It is quite interesting that in Bohemia and in actually countries governed by Habsburgs, this was quite popular ritual, the coronation of the virgins. And on the other hand, that in some other countries it was not the case. From my perspective, I also study New Spain, and there this wasn't an issue. There, the most important official proceeding for Marian Paul was actually the proclamation and recognition of Virgin of Guadalupe as patroness in the 18th century, and we don't have nothing like this official act of coronation in Mexico. And I'm also unaware if in Spain this was the case. But as I know, this went from Rome.
So the question?
You must be question.
Yeah, I have only one remark that I am a bit surprised that this concerns Bohemia. The miracles image in Kokote is not mentioned anywhere, and that I'm quite surprised that this concerns Bohemia, the Hostin Hill and the St. Hill near Olmos are not mentioned.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, this is. I think this is due to the main concentration on Bohemia, actually. I was also surprised that I started to look into it and compare different cases, that the Moravia is also like put a little bit aside. And we have one example from 18th century of Atlas Marianus Moravicus, which was conserved only in manuscript. But if in case of those Jesuits, the preference for Bohemia is quite clear. And I would like to also add about the question of selecting the images. It sometimes does not make much sense why they picked that image or not the other. But if we look into their correspondence, we can see that many images that they included into these monographies were not widely known at that moment at all. They are like discussing between them which image you know and I can use. I see this type of dynamic there, or they first one published it in some book and others Reddit, and then they can use those images they didn't know before also in their variant.
I am a bit surprised this concern Crocodile because it's very near to Tower. So I suppose that it must be there must be some idea to somehow recover the city side or something like this.
And it was 1936. Well, he didn't make it. I mean, the code didn't develop to that extent that it could actually make it.
Yeah. And for example, the case of Via Sacra to Stara Boleslav is actually revealing about this question of picking the images, because there is the collaboration of Tanner with the donors of the chapels, and we have documented in letters sent from Tanner to, for example, Václav Sternberg or the Archbishop Sternberg, that he is actually asking them about the images on their mediums. So he can adjust it and he can put more images related to those parts of territory. So I'm sorry, I don't know specifically this case of the image.
Other questions? Well, thank you very much. Let's thank all three speakers again, and we shall reconvene when? 10:50? 11. 11, okay. All right, perfect.